And we're so very glad for you to be here joining us for this panel discussion on the costs and consequences of mandating paid sick leave. And just by way of a little bit of background, before we dive into the substance of today's event, just the background specific to the Austin Ordinance that was adopted here. As y'all may be aware, the timeline was that it was really first discussed in public in October of 2017 with an announcement by City Council member Greg Cesar announced his intention to move forward with this type of ordinance. Then you had in January of 2018, so a few months ago, is when there was the very first draft of the ordinance that was published. And then on February 16th of 2018, the Austin City Council, with a 9-2 vote, adopted the mandatory paid sick leave ordinance. Austin is the only city in Texas to do so, although we know from news reports that cities like San Antonio and Houston and Dallas are already considering similar proposals. And so I'm thrilled to have with me today to discuss this issue, here specific to the city of Austin, and also more broadly, in policy areas, our four panelists. And the first one I'm going to introduce here to my immediate left is Tina Cannon. Tina is the Vice President of Government Relations for the Austin Chamber of Commerce after serving as a Senior Policy Analyst for the Austin City Council. And she was also the co-founder of Pre-Accelerate, which was a pre-seed stage incubator in Austin. To Tina's left is Don Skeeter Miller. Don's the owner and president of the County Line Restaurant, favorite of mine. He began with his career at the County Line back in 1975, working his way up, and notably was recently inducted into the Texas Restaurant Association Hall of Honor. Next to Don is Annie Spillman. Annie has been the Texas Legislative Director for the National Federation of Independent Business since 2014, and she leads the organization's public policy and political programs throughout the state. And also with us is State Representative Paul Workman. Paul has served the people of Travis County in House District 47 since January of 2011. His district, as you know, here in Austin encompasses most of western Travis County as well as portions of southern Travis County, and he serves as a member of the Committee of Business and Industry and is also a business owner in the construction industry here in Travis County in Austin, Texas. So help me real quick welcome our panel members today. So before I get into the substance of our discussion, I think it's important to just note, especially for some of you that may be first-time guests here to the foundation, that the Texas Public Policy Foundation, we are a nonpartisan research institute. We have these type of events here for those here in person and also for everyone watching us online in order to have a robust discussion of important public policy issues from representatives of all sides. And to this point, I think it's important to mention here that we also invited to be part of this panel discussion the mayor of Austin and all of the city council persons who voted in favor of the paid sick leave ordinance and other proponents, including the Workers' Defense Project and also the Texas Civil Rights Project, and they declined our invitation to participate. But we're going to have a great discussion with the broad views that we have represented here today. And I think the best way is to just jump into the meat of this issue and talk about what we have here in Austin and really how it matters to businesses and workers in our economy here locally and also statewide. So Annie, I want to start with you. And within the context that the Austin economy right now is red hot. We've got unemployment at 3.1% as of March of this year. How does the issue of this mandatory leave policy relate to the current economy in Austin, and what does this type of ordinance do to small businesses?
Thanks, Rob, and thank y'all for having me here. So, I think obviously it's good to have a low unemployment rate. It can potentially help the employee and help the employer. And it's what keeps, the market competitive. Like right now, employees are in the driver's seat. So instead of really having to be competitive with other applicants, they kind of force the employer to be competitive. And that's what works. It's a natural process. So small business owners, in order to be competitive with one another and with larger businesses, they have to offer a higher wage if they can, or better benefits. And they have the flexibility to do so, and that works. It's what works. The majority of my members have about 40 or fewer employees, and, but they try to stay very competitive. I've talked to most of them, and most of them start well above the minimum wage and offer vacation time or, good benefits that will draw skilled workers. We poll our members on a regular basis, and perennially they say that finding skilled workers is a problem. They've got the positions open, but because it's competitive out there, to draw the right employees to your business, they're having trouble getting folks. We've addressed it somewhat in the legislature by creating a career path, trade skills programs in schools, which you helped us with, and so now we've got those skilled workers, but they've got to put out the right benefits packages and pay to attract those folks. So when the government mandates that you should offer something as part of your employee benefits package, it almost, it's like a Sophie's Choice for small business owners. It's economics 101. If they can't afford it, they're going to have to cut back in other areas. Do I cut positions? Do I cut hours? Now do I have to take away their vacation time, or maybe not reimburse them to get insurance? Because if I don't comply with this mandate, I'm going to be fined, penalized, potentially, there's be some sort of legal action against the employer, and then they're labeled a bad employer. So, it's a tough decision to make. And then it does have strong implications, especially on the small business community, because just regulations alone right now cost small business owners over $12,000 per employee per year. And that's not adding on to the mandates that they're having to comply with.
Well, thank you. Paul, to move to you from maybe a statewide perspective and then moving in, we brag all the time that Texas is open for business, and we see that employers from California and Illinois, New York, other states are coming here to Texas. From your involvement with the Business and Industry Committee with the Texas House, what do you see about this issue from a, economy, business type perspective?
Well, my perspective is that this is an area where the city or municipalities just have no business getting involved in. We are a capitalist state, we are a capitalist nation, and whenever you have these types of policies, they fit the definition of socialism. And it will eventually, if it's allowed to stand, it will impact other businesses considering moving to the state of Texas. And it'll eventually work its way to where we'll be like California or Illinois or New York or one of those places like that. So we have to kind of put a stop to it here.
Tina, to pull into the Austin economy with y'all's role as the Chamber of Commerce, how do you see that this impacts your members and really the economy here locally?
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming and sharing your time with us today. The Austin Chamber represents about 80-some-odd% of our members are small businesses. There are about 30,000 businesses in the Austin area. Roughly 23,000 of those employ between 1 and 9. So this is a huge impact to what is the smallest within our business community. If the intent of this ordinance was to stick it to the man, if you will, those corporations were not in attendance at any of the council hearings. So we're trying to stand up for the smallest of business owners who the vast majority don't even have the time to come to an event like this, or to come to any of the 4 p.m. public hearings that were had by City Council, or to react within the 19 days that the ordinance dropped and then was voted on. This is the first time I've seen a headline like this in this discussion when it comes to paid sick leave. We did not have a robust discussion about what are the actual Austin impacts How will this really hit the Austin economy? There's no real data that's being used. Those who were advocating for it were using nationally extrapolated data applied to the Austin MSA to come up with this magic number of some odd people that are not covered. What is that number? That's what we asked as a chamber. We didn't take a position for or against. Most of our members offer great benefits. Like Annie mentioned before, we're at a near full employment in Austin. We're at 2.9%. That doesn't include all your favor drivers and all your Lyft and Uber folks who are also employed. So in a market that has full employment, what is the true impact? And that's what the chamber position was. Let's take a breath. Let's not pass what is a seismic change to an employment market without having an actual study of the real economic impact to what is mainly the small business folks.
So to now pull into the individual business perspective, Mr. Miller, to carry this discussion further, wanted to get your thoughts, but also wanted to get you to add your personal experience as a business owner here in Austin of how you currently address issues where you have employees who get ill or have an emergency or have some kind of unexpected leave. I'm sure that comes up. So love to get your thoughts on the economic impact, but also get your personal perspective of what this is going to mean to you, but also how you currently kind of address the situation without a regulation in place.
Now, you've just asked me more questions than you asked.
Yeah, but you're restaurateur of the year, so Hall of Famer over here.
Well, first off, I appreciate you letting a guy that makes potato salad for a living come and be with this distinguished panel. And, the county line has been in business. I've owned and operated it for 43 years, and you don't get to stay around as an employer for 43 years if you're not doing the right things. Our average management tenure at our company is 30 years, and I've only hired one manager outside the company, and that was 24 years ago. So we do treat our employees well, and that is not only management level, but just starting levels. So that's important to me, and it's like a family at our business. What are some of the benefits that we give our employees? And other restaurateurs do the same thing. The employee meals that we deliver to our employees when they're working is running about $300,000 a year for our company. That's something that we have to consider when we talk about paid sick leave. Are we going to still be able to do that? We have a bonus program. We contribute matching funds to their retirement funds. We allow these employees to have an open and flexible schedule. We are not a 9-to-5 operation. We're a 7-day-a-week operation, and so we have to have a flexible schedule. We have part-time employees, we have full-time employees, and those employees have families. They have to go to their son's birthday party. They have to take a relative to the doctor. So we have an open schedule policy to where they can, if they have to leave work, then they can make that shift up within that pay period and make up those dollars. If an employee calls us and says, I'm sick, I can't come to work, the first thing that we want them to try to do, they have a list of all of the employees that are on the schedule, okay? We have 43 open positions at the county line on the lake right now. So it's easy for them to find that person to fill that spot. The second thing is if they can't find someone to fill that spot, then we will get that spot covered, and we will offer them an opportunity to make up that shift before the pay period ends so they can make that money back up. Now, we did have a situation where an employee called in at the last minute and said they were sick, but we saw on Facebook that they were at the Mean-Eyed Cat doing Jaeger shots the night before. And so, we might ask that they have to bring us some sort of doctor's excuse, or we have something called a dreaded duty where you might have to clean a barbecue pit. So, there's those, but that's how it works for us. And, as far as the economic impact for us, just to cover paid sick leave for my Austin operations is going to cost, just for the employee level, is about $200,000 a year, okay? That does not include the cost that I have to pay someone to cover that shift, okay? I mentioned earlier, I'm not a 9-to-5 business. in a 9-to-5 business, a lot of times that person can miss work and then make it up the next day or catch up the next day. I got customers coming in the door. There's a demand for my product, and I have to have somebody there. I'll give you an example. New Year's, this is without paid sick leave. New Year's Eve, I had 7 employees call in sick. I had to make a decision that night, am I going to stay open? Or am I going to try to open and give poor service to these employees and have a negative impact on my business? I think, what would happen if I had to pay paid sick leave? How many more employees would I not have that day if they're going to get, if they don't get paid for not coming to work, then they're going to get paid for not coming to work. It may be 14 employees. I right now at my Fly Right Chicken operations can't open the counter service at certain meal points during the day because I don't have enough employees in that store. I have 2 employees. If 2 people call in sick, I can't open the doors.
Thank you. And I think, some of your experience seems to be similar with a lot of businesses in this area. You had a recent survey done by the Austin Business Journal here that showed that 73% of the respondents to the survey demonstrate or said that they already provide some type or level of leave arrangements with their employees. So, Tina, to you, if 3 out of 4 Austin employers already do this in some form or fashion, is this ordinance that was just passed really needed? Or what do you see that from the perspective of your members?
And that's the big question. And that was the big question and the big push that we tried to have in those discussions in the 19 days that led to that vote, is let's find out the real number. If there is a real fire to put out, then let's know that. Not only to know what we can do policy-wise that is good to put in place, but also to be able to measure the effects. So let's say, obviously, this takes effect in October. We have still no idea where our baseline was and what our starting point was to be able to measure it a year from now or 5 years from now to see the actual effects. Did this help folks? Did this solve the problem that was being presented by those who were supporting this? We don't know those data points. And that was the big ask from most of the businesses that we talked to was, number one, what? This is happening? What's going on? Most of them are still getting calls today. I got a call just last week from an employer saying, what is this I'm hearing about? It was so fast that we couldn't access the 30,000 some odd businesses in Austin to find out how many really do currently offer, or what would the cost be to not offer it, or what do they have to take away? No different than your home household account, right? If your cable bill goes up $50 because your contract ran out, $50 doesn't magically fall from the sky, right? You have to make a choice as a person. What are you going to do in your own finances? And so, because you do it off of data, and our big ask was to do this off of real data, really survey Austinites. It's interesting that as a community that I love and I've lived in for, well, I won't say how old because it'll give my age away, for a long time. Austinites, we pretty much don't like being told what to do for the most part. So it's interesting that there was this fever rush to tell us what to do. It just doesn't seem to mesh well with who Austin is. And I know that we could have done this better. There could have been a better dialogue and exchange. We could have found out the real problem that we're trying to solve. We're a town of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs find problems, find gaps in the market, and solve them. And those voices were not brought to the table because this was so politically expediently done for whatever cause you can fill in the blank to rush this thing through. And now we're seeing more and more people are finding out and asking questions still, from small employers to large, because we don't have the answer to that question.
Representative Workman, when you see that 73% of the businesses in the county you represent at least tell the Austin Business Journal they do this, what's your reaction? What are your thoughts?
This is not about whether it was needed or not. This is one in a series of ordinances that this council has passed. This is a battle between capitalism and socialism. And we have a council currently who is determined to do things that are socialist in nature. And the paid sick leave, the fair chance hiring, all of those things where they're mandating what private business is supposed to do are all efforts to do that. They don't really care about whether it's needed or necessary or if there's really a big problem with employers and sick people. They just want to try to push these ideological ideas out and get them in place so that they can say that they've done this and move us towards socialism.
Annie, what's y'all's perspective?
Well, I mean, I think it's funny because, you know, when I came on board with NFIB, I didn't realize how awful employers were. When I read through legislation or, you know, we find these ordinances passing, and they essentially are saying that these employers are, you know, out to scheme the system or steal money from their employees. And I'll tell you from our perspective, when I speak to our 20,000 members in the state of Texas, and this is ranging from, you know, every economic sector, from manufacturing, construction, retail, wholesale, agriculture, you know, they tell us they're often the last ones to get paid, and you can probably verify this. You know, they have to make payroll, they have to pay taxes, they have to do this, do that, and they might not even get a paycheck that month. A guy called me yesterday, actually 2 days ago, and said he was asking about this paid sick leave ordinance, and he's in East Texas, and because he knows that this is spreading like wildfire. And Austin was just a benchmark city. But he said, you know, my manager makes twice as much as I do, and I pay him that much because he deserves it. He's skilled. I don't want to lose him. And so to that effect, same thing with benefits. I mean, you know, they want to take care of their employees. These people are like family to them. So they're going to offer what they can when they can. And I always say, just because the government mandates it doesn't mean they can afford it. And, you know, was there a need? We don't know. Like Tina said, there wasn't the right amount of research or, you know, data taken on this. But I'll tell you that oftentimes, because you do have to make a choice in order to keep your doors open so that the rest of your folks can stay employed. But oftentimes, if they had a decision between a higher wage or being paid sick leave for some obscure reason that the city, this ordinance is so broad and obscure, I think it's almost like a gotcha policy, so that you know, they can get that employer and fine them. But you know, they usually choose to get paid a little bit more every month, and that's the fact. I don't really know if it was needed, because oftentimes our folks are providing that benefit anyway, or giving them an opportunity to make up a shift and make up that money.
So Skeeter, let me ask you, you already told us about the policies you have for your business, but you've been a leader in the business community here in Austin for quite a while. What is your experience with, you know, your peers in the business community, you know, vendors that you work with, competitors that you compete with, about other businesses and how they already address, you know, issues involving employees who have to be gone, you know, on an unexpected basis?
Well, I can't speak for all of them, but I think what I've seen, you know, when we opened County Line 43 years ago, there were 600 restaurants in this city. There's 8,000 today. I don't think half of them really realize what's going on. I spend time at City Hall. We have a handful of restaurateurs that show up, so they really are clueless to what's happening right now. Our distributors that bring products to us right now can't even get drivers to make deliveries. They're having to bring in drivers out of Dallas and Houston in order to drive the trucks and bring our products to us. So, you know, I'm really concerned, you know, with this coming up in October the 1st. There's so many different things that come into play. Our payroll system has to change in order to be able to keep up with what paid sick leave goes to what employees. I met with some employers yesterday that have other restaurants around the city and around the state. They can't get enough employees in Austin, Texas, so they're having to bring in employees from other cities that don't provide paid sick leave. So you bring in an employee that doesn't get paid sick leave. He's going to come into Austin. He's going to get paid sick leave. So now you got to keep up with his records for paid sick leave in Austin, no paid sick leave in New Braunfels. And then at the same time, you have to consolidate those hours, because if they're going to work overtime, you have to pay them time and a half for the total hours that they worked. I mean, it's an administrative nightmare. And the cost of that, I can't even put a number to it.
Well, and nor could the city, if I could jump in.
Of
The
course.
city, during that process, could not answer the question from the dais of how much will this cost just the city taxpayers? Because this was so fast, city staff was quite blunt and very honest and said, we have not had time to do the analysis. We don't know what the taxpayer impact is. But yet council still took action, and they still voted it. And they included themselves in the ordinance. Fortunately, because there was a bit of an uproar that they were originally excluding themselves from that. And so there was enough uproar, but the city staff themselves said, we haven't even caught up from putting the administrative rules in place for the fair chance hiring that happened the prior year. And we don't know what the exact impact is going to be to taxpayers. And kind of to that, staying within the government space, the largest employer, if you will, collectively in the Austin area are government entities. So if this is about the people, and this is for the good of the people, then would it not make sense for the same folks who were championing this to happen at the city level to march up to the commissioner's court and ask for the same? Would it not make sense for them to march over to all of the ISDs in the area and ask the same, to Central Health, or to march up the hill? If this is truly about the people, then where are the voices who are standing up for those people that work within the largest employment sector in our area?
Let me look at it a little bit different. Representative Workman, Paul, for your perspective, there was news last week that New Jersey adopted a statewide mandatory leave policy. And I say this tongue in cheek, you know, what's good for New Jersey's got to be good for Texas, right? But what is your view from the legislature in, you know, the role in addressing what Austin passed, but also, you know, what the statewide policy or where the legislature should come from on this?
So when we were working on fair chance hiring, I had 76 co-authors on the legislation. When we introduced the paid sick leave or bill this time, we'll also have a large number of co-sponsors. The conservative nature of the Texas House and the Texas Senate is strong enough that that these types of policies are viewed as really a problem for the state of Texas, and they will be supportive of our efforts to take that back. And they being the general body of the House, do not think that cities should have carte blanche to pass whatever kind of ordinances that they think they should, simply because they're an elected body. And so we'll do fine working on trying to undo this stuff at the Capitol this next session.
Let me ask a quick follow-up and then get the views of our panel. You mentioned last session was the fair chance hiring. This session's, you know, paid sick leave. Who knows what the next session would be? What are your views on legislation that kind of takes a issue-by-issue approach, or are we at the point where there needs to be some kind of broader preemption at the state level to just protect businesses and kind of have a larger exclusion of city power to regulate?
There are some states who have passed broader preemption type ordinance statutes to keep cities from doing the things that they're doing here in Austin. And that is on one of the items that we're looking at as to whether or not that's the way to go, or individual statutes to try to do each one. We'll be working on that over the course of the next several months and come up with a strategy when time comes in January.
Can I add to that? I was just going to say on that, because, you know, we look at what other states have done and what NFIB does in other states. And there's a state preemption chart that shows other states that have passed similar legislation to preempt local ordinances from going outside of their jurisdiction and passing these restrictive piecemeal local ordinances that create inconsistent labor standards throughout the state. And I'll tell you that it's funny, and you know, and we're gonna let legislators know and let Governor Abbott know that, you know, Texas is considered a business-friendly state, right? Well, in this instance, Texas was in the red, meaning that they were considered a non-business-friendly state. And I mean, that should raise a red flag, that now we are not considered a business-friendly state in that regard, you know, because I do think that cities are being pressured by these out-of-state groups to pass ordinances that aren't within their jurisdiction. And so, you know, I'm confident that the legislators, both Democrats and Republican, because this is not a partisan issue. We want to preserve our small business environment in Texas. You know, we need to look at legislation like that, and I'm confident that that both parties will look at this and understand the need for maybe some legislation to pursue, you know, keeping the cities in their lane, so to speak.
Let's get a real quick your view on the state jumping in on this, the legislature engaging on this issue, what you'd want to look for as a business owner.
Well, it's already passed here. So, you know, we're in a position where, you know, hope is becoming a strategy, and that's usually not the same in our business. And so, you know, we're already working on that. We're already working with different legislators. I know they're going into their committee meetings. We're letting them know. All we can do is let them know how we run our business and what we do and how it's going to affect our business. Because truly, what's happened here in Austin is there's a lot of restaurateurs that are hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and this is really going to affect them deeply. We already have predictive scheduling, which is coming down the line, which is going to severely affect our business and is not fair either to the employee or the employer. So we're really hoping that we can really get something done in the legislature.
Tina, let me ask you, and within the context of the next slide, the Austin Chamber had this letter that estimated that the paid sick leave ordinance would have a negative $140 million impact on private sector employees. And I know that was just based on the little bit of data that was out there. It was y'all's estimate.
Mm-hmm.
But would you kind of speak to that within the broader discussion that we just had about the impact about this and what you see as the state's role?
So quickly on the state's role, and then I'll get to the data. The state's role in this is important because the voices of the small business community were not heard. They were actually ridiculed and laughed when they came to testify at City Council. The voices of what are the iconic businesses like County Line and others, who are the framework of who we are as a community, were ridiculed during this process and did not have their voices heard. So having it at the state level at least allows them an opportunity to be in the discussion. As to the data, just using I forget what the other group was called that put the original number out of the 223,000 in Austin that don't have access to paid sick leave. That was a data point borrowed from the Bureau of Labor Statistics national average of 37%. And I said, that's fine, I'll play that game. I'll use your data point. So we took that 37% on the same Bureau of Labor Statistics, figured out the average number of hours per employee and the average cost of paid sick leave per hour, and extrapolated that out, just the same dance that was danced up on the other side, and came to $140 million. So if we want to use pretend data, I can use pretend data too.
Annie, how do you guys see the impact of this?
You know, I want to speak to what Tina just said as far as these business owners that did take their time to go and speak to the council that were laughed at and yelled at and scoffed at. And I'll say that as the only organization in Texas that represents the voice of small business owners, we were too. And you know, there's some groups, we don't follow this mantra, that if you can't attack the fact, you attack the fact finder.
Right.
And that's what's happening. They can't attack the message, so they attack the messenger. I mean, NFIB has been discredited. And in the media, they've only, by the way, picked up a couple of stories on our side, on the small business side, but they're running rampant with stories about how, you know, we're slave owners and, you know, that NFIB isn't really a small business group. You know, they're very well funded by, you know, these very well-known donors. And I'm going, well, I'd like to see some of that money, maybe get a little better salary over here. But I mean, we are 100% grassroots run organization. We ballot our members before every session, and they tell us what our legislative agenda is going to be. And then I tell Representative Workman, and he knows he's held accountable because he has to go see these people at the grocery store, wherever, and then that's how we create our voting record. And I'm not trying to get off track here, but it's just, you know, we didn't have the opportunity to speak, and now that we've spoken, we're being totally discredited, and they're trying to discredit the actual business owner. And you know, I think it's time that, you know, that the truth is being heard, and that these facts that are coming from these outside, these aren't Texas groups, and these aren't Texas employees that we're hearing from. This is a model strategic plan that's going on nationwide, and this paid sick leave, this had nothing to do with trying to provide a benefit to employees. This was a benchmark, they even said it themselves, a benchmark in the South. They're trying to penetrate Texas and come in here and make this a California-style state, and it doesn't work here. And, you know, the state has spoken and said we want to be a business-friendly state. We want to welcome entrepreneurship. We want to welcome business owners that employ over 8 million workers in Texas. And we've seen what these types of policies have done in other cities and other states. It's just decimated their economy. And we can't let it happen here.
Paul, do you see this as a, line in the sand type issue, or, really one to hold the line on?
We believe that if these ordinances that the city of Austin have passed, fair chance hiring, expedited permitting, now paid sick leave or paid time off really is what it is, and then we know that predictive scheduling is coming and some of these others, if they're allowed to stand here, they will spread. As you mentioned, we're already hearing reports out of San Antonio and Houston of these other councils wanting to pick this up. We have to stop this here and now. And I get criticized because I'm interfering with local municipalities, that I don't have any business doing that. And the fact of the matter is, we do. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence and what it says, that governments are instituted to protect the liberties of their people. This council is trying to strip the liberties of their people, and we can't sit by and let that happen. Secondly, let me say that our cities are chartered by the state. They didn't create themselves, and they're chartered by the state. And finally, if you look at Article 11, Section 13 of the Texas Constitution, it gives the state legislature specific authority to deal in matters of governance at the local level. So this is not some new crazy idea that workmen's come up with. This has been here in our Constitution. And so we do have authority, and we do have a right, and we do have a duty to try to make sure that these types of policies do not stand in the state of Texas.
Skeeter, let me ask you, and moving to the next slide, again with the Austin Business Journal survey, their numbers, 53% of business respondents stated that the ordinance would have a negative effect on their bottom line. If we jump forward to October 1st and nothing's been done in the interim, how do you see that this impacts your business, and how do you respond? You raise prices, you lay people off. I mean, what are the calculations that you're doing in trying to figure out how you'd adjust on this?
Well, I can't lay anybody off. I've got 43 open spots at the county line of the lake. So, but the first thing that came up when they had the so-called stakeholder meetings was that all we have to do is raise prices. And I mean, I can only speak for County Line. We're a protein-based business. Our menu is fine dining. When your average check is almost $30, I mean, people are really thinking about what they're gonna do when they go out to eat at your place. It's a special occasion. If I raise prices, I usually see a 6 to 10% drop in my business. And I'm only raising my prices enough to just barely cover what my increased costs are. So can I raise prices? No. Where am I going to be able to get this money from? I did ask them in the stakeholder meeting, somebody sit down with me, let's get out my financial statement and let's go down line by line and you show me where it's going to come from. And nobody was willing to do that. So where does it come from? We're a great charitable organization. We do a lot of charity work with County Line, give a lot of things to kids organizations. That's the first thing that's got to go. Okay, I mean, the bonus programs that we do, we're going to have to cut back on those. Do we still, match the IRA funds that we have done in the past? Maybe not as much. Annual Christmas bonuses, we've always given a Christmas bonus to our employees, all of our employees. This last year, our sales were down $1.2 million, okay? So, but we gave out Christmas bonuses, Now we've got these sanctions that are coming in, these ordinances coming in. Maybe we can't do that next year. It's important to me after 43 years to continue to be in business, okay, in all of my cities. And this has affected us tremendously. And I'm hoping Mr. Workman over there is going to take care of this for us.
I think that's a hard reality. What is your perspective of other chamber members on how this is going to hurt and how businesses in Austin are going to be forced to respond.
So we've heard from a lot of our members who are engaged at least in this, and there's probably a chunk of them who don't have any idea this is coming. One of the unintended consequences of this ordinance is the carryover requirement. The carryover requirement is X number of hours unused has to get carried over into the next cycle, which means that Skeeter would have to bookmark on his balance sheet a liability for unused paid sick leave, right? Accounting 101, any liability is an offsetting asset, which means he's got to either have cash on hand or a line of credit. One of our businesses in particular, she said, I've got to decide on my 35-year-old building, do I put in a new roof this year? But now I can't decide that because when I go to my bank for the line of credit, I now have this extra burden on my book that I have to carry for this sick time. So there are some intense unintended consequences that are a result of this on a financial level for what is the little guy. Again, it's not the giant corporations that were up at council, that were in the stakeholder meetings. The ones it impacts the most are the smallest in our community. And that's who we're hearing from as they're learning about this. The scary part too is at some point in October when this does hit, those who don't know are going to be in a gotcha net. And don't think for a minute that that's not going to happen. The city staff themselves have also indicated that they're not even prepared with administrative rules or full-time employees on staff to handle what will be the belly of complaints coming through. The last thing I ever want to look up and see in Austin is a bunch of corporate franchised restaurants. But those are the ones who can absorb this type of mandate. And we need to make sure that we are standing up for the smallest in our community, those who make Austin, Austin.
Yeah,
Echo that?
I would like, yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. I want to add to that in saying that, well, first of all, when we also do our Research Foundation ballots, our small business members, and biggest problems and priorities are uncertainty over government regulations, uncertainty over economic conditions, and uncertainty over just government action, period. And so it's hard to plan for that monetarily, and so then you've got these other regulations where, so, not knowing what lies ahead does restrict, a business owner's ability to grow their business or to add, employees. I will say with the tax relief plan that happened on the federal level, we've already got our business owners that said that they're already putting it back into raising wages or adding employees, so they at least have that bit of hope. But, I just lost track on where it was going.
I was amazing.
It was good too. It was really good. But I don't even. It was. I had a really good statement there. Now it's gone because I got off track. But anyway, I mean, you get the point. I mean, these small business owners are going to be the hardest hit because in other parts that they don't have. Let's going back to the gotcha moment. They don't have in-house HR departments or compliance officers or lawyers. And to be really honest, if they're, and this isn't like a sales pitch, but if they're not a member of an organization that advocates for them, like the Chamber or the Austin Alliance or, the NFIB, that educates them on, obscure, confusing, complex ordinances, they are set up to be fined. And they don't know, I mean, a lot of my guys have called and said, first of all, what is this, what's going on? I explain the ordinance, and then they say, well, I'm going to move my headquarters out of Austin. And I said, whoa,
Yep.
not so fast, not so fast. The way this was written, and it was written like this on purpose, was that if you have any employee that works 80 hours or more in the city of Austin, this applies to you. And, I think it's unfortunate. This is why I think this ordinance was more political in nature rather than policy, because the breadth of it and the confusing nature of it, it really does just set these employers up for the gotcha moment. I mean, they really just want to get these employers. They want to get at them.
If I could pull back and get your thoughts, but also a little broader context, from a policy matter, Texas is an at-will state. And, in this context, with a regulation like this, you're mandating a particular condition of employment, whereas otherwise, from the employee perspective, maybe I'd want to have $12 an hour instead of $10 and, time off, or, the right to be able to negotiate your conditions with the employer. I'll work for this much, but I also want, this kind of schedule or whatnot. Do you see a fairness issue with the employee's ability to kind of negotiate for what they want out of a job when you have regulations like this that say everybody's got to do this condition?
Yeah, and again, if these regulations are allowed to stand, what would be next? Would it be that you have some extraordinary civil service type due process before you can terminate someone? Would that be the next thing that they would propose? Or would it be, well, look, 40 hours a week is just too much. We really need to let people have more time. So let's just mandate 35 hours a week. I mean, where are you going to stop with this when you get on this slope out there with these types of policies? And I wanted to make the point that this council, in particular the mayor, has talked a lot about affordability in Austin. And it's not affordable to live here. And yet, they continue to pass these types of ordinances. Fair chance hiring, the expedited permitting, now paid time off, this next one that they've got coming, predictive scheduling, all will add cost, and it will make Austin less affordable. The work that they're doing, the things that they're doing with Austin Energy, the buying of the green, they bought 330 megawatts of solar power at twice the going rate. They're losing $300 million a year on the wholesale side for Austin Energy, and yet they talk about affordability. So out of one corner of their mouth, they're saying we need to be more affordable, and out of the other corner of the mouth, they keep trying to mandate things on businesses, which makes things less affordable. I know that in all of these ordinances, the businesses have stood up and said this is going to cost more money, and yet they don't care about that. This is just more proof that this is ideology. This is not about protecting the worker and trying to do the right thing for them. It is just about ideology.
You know, as we get pretty close to the Q&A part from this from the audience we have here, I want to focus in a little bit on some of the specifics with the Austin policy. You know, Annie, there's been almost all the discussion about this issue has been when there's an employee that gets sick, that has an illness. Mm-hmm. But the Austin ordinance is much broader than that. And, you know, I have a copy of the definition here with all of the categories of things, including, you know, moving or other family members, and more than just illness. You know, what's your reaction to the scope of this within the context of the debate that we're having here and we're having out in the public?
I think if it were genuinely about the worker, they would have written it a little tighter. I think that this is, again, just set up for the employer to accidentally mess up because they don't know that, you know, if John's sister's friend has to go get preventative health care, which could even include going to the dentist and getting her teeth cleaned, that you're supposed to let him off and pay for him to go, you know, assist her with her dental cleaning. You know, and then they get fined. I just feel like there's going to be I know this sounds skeptical and like some sort of conspiracy, but I've seen it where they, you know, might plant situations where then the employer, you know, doesn't somehow follow the ordinance to the T, and then they're fined. You know, what works right now, and again, these folks want to take care of their employees. You see, I mean, our small business owners, they're not a corporation. They see their employees every day. They know how their families are doing. If, you know, one of their employees wants to get off for their kids' choir concert, or, you know, we're right now with all the kids' activities at the end of school and they want to go, you know, for their kids' activity. Sure, fine. And that flexibility works because you can't always define a situation when you're going to need to let someone off. But so they attempt to define it, but in defining it, they leave it so broad that it's just, you're just tying the hands of the employer and the employee.
Peter, do you see any practical problems with trying to, you know, administer this definition or to plan for it as a business owner?
Well, I don't know how to plan for it when there's no accountability on the employee side. You know, it's like They don't have to be accountable for showing up on time, calling 5 minutes before they're supposed to be there, not showing up at all, and we can't do anything about it because we're so short employees that we have to welcome that employee back. I mean, I talk to my managers all the time, and I say, guys, we are having to hire people that 10 years ago we would have never hired. So we have to hold those people accountable. We have to make sure they come to work on time. We have to make sure that they, follow the guidelines that we have. I'm real concerned mainly with just the economic end of it and being able to pay for it. And because I can tell you right now, I mentioned earlier, 7 employees didn't show up for work because it was New Year's. I mean, the other day at the County Line on the Hill, I was up there to do some work with some new menu items. I had 1 waiter and 1 hostess, no dishwasher. It was critical. And I mean, it was a matter of me calling my corporate office. I had, the accounting department, they were good bussers, seriously. and so we had everybody out there and all hands on deck. That's just the kind of company we are. But I can't see it getting any better if we're going to pay them not to come to work.
And can I just add to because I know we've got some of our other members in the audience who also run a restaurant. The thing is they want to hold the employer accountable and fine them or do whatever they're going to do to the employer. But this ordinance doesn't say that the employee needs to provide a doctor's note or any sort of written evidence that they are taking off for what is drawn out in this ordinance. But if the employer doesn't follow through with the ordinance, they're going to have to pay for it. But I mean, it's not an even playing field.
Tina, one of the parts you mentioned already in our discussion that the governmental entities are not required to follow this. But it's true that it's not all private businesses that are subject to this ordinance, that there is the exemption in the ordinance that makes exempt businesses that operate under a collective bargaining agreement. Is that fair? And what is your reaction to this carve out when this is supposed to be about, all employers?
So that was a softball question? Yeah, that's a one-word answer, right? No, it's
Yeah.
not fair. And you look at the folks who were actively engaged, if you will, at the stakeholder meetings. There was no doubt what groups they were from, and collective bargaining is a heartstring for them. And so it was an easy thing for them to exempt because those who were going to be impacted by that wouldn't be involved in that discussion. And so no, it's not an equitable playing field. The city passed along with the county, a regional workforce plan to completely revamp how we do employment in the region. And part of that, one of the major components of that was internships, right? This ordinance affects interns, but it doesn't affect those who are under collective bargaining. So really, where's the equity in that?
Paul, is this a red flag for you? You mentioned ulterior motives, but when you see in this ordinance a complete exemption for certain businesses that, collectively bargain, what does that jump out to you?
Well, there's no question but there's a move to try to expand collective bargaining in our state. And this is one of the elements that's working on that. The expedited permitting ordinance that they passed has an element to it that is really designed to try to do that, to organize construction workers. So it is definitely a red flag that we have to try to put a stop to this here and now. Otherwise, we'll just get worse and worse.
I mean, on top of an unlevel playing field here with these ordinances, and NFIB's been very vocal about this, that our government through the public employee paychecks, through state payroll, city payroll, and on down, we're collecting membership dues for these national labor unions. And I've gotten aggregate data from the comptroller's office that shows that we've raised them over $100 million. And we know that they're using that money to advocate on the local and state level for issues that will completely be the demise of the small business community. I'm the lobbyist for NFIB, and we have 20,000 members. Their membership dues pay my salary. I have to answer to them. Who do these national labor unions answer to when money's just flowing into their funds and they're able to afford to advocate and get stuff passed in 19 days. I mean, it's crazy that this is happening in the state of Texas.
Well, last word, Skeeter, on that. As business owner here for a long time, this issue was first mentioned in the public here in Austin, to my knowledge, in October. That's when it was first brought up. February, boom, it's done. I mean, I can't think of any other way that government acts that fast. But you were involved in the stakeholder meetings. You engaged in the process. What do you think about your voice as a business owner as reflected in the end product? And where does that, where do you see things now?
Well, there was no voice as a business owner. I mean, you went to the meetings. I've worked on 13 different ordinances in this city, and some of them taken 5 years. Those were real stakeholder meetings that I went to. This was not a stakeholder meeting. There was all these people bust in. Hoover Alexander was called a racist. I was told that I caused sexual harassment in the workplace because I don't pay my employees enough, so they have to go do whatever they need to do at the table to get a tip. I was told also that if I didn't, I told them, I said, my bottom line is this in my stores, and they told me, well, if that's your bottom line, then you just need to go out of business.
I was sitting there. I remember that. I was sitting right there. It's crazy.
After a while, you just kind of don't talk. And, there was, and people were afraid to come to those meetings because it was
very combative.
it was sickening. And so, did we have a voice? We had no voice. And then, we met with the mayor on 2 occasions, and he told us in no certain terms, he says, this is going to pass no matter what. And we didn't even have a draft ordinance.
Yeah.
So how are you going to work on something? How are you going to have a voice when the word is this is going to pass and we don't even have a draft ordinance?
If Paul said that at the state level with all the stakeholders and his constituents, you wouldn't be reelected. I mean, you have to work with every group out there, and both sides of the house. It's just crazy that would even be able to happen.
Well, thank you all very much. Let's bring the audience into the discussion, but first, will y'all just help me thank Tina, Skeeter, and Paul. We're going to have a microphone walking around for questions, so if you'd raise your hand, we'll try to get to everyone we have within the time we have. Clint?
Thank you for your participation today and your information that you've shared. I'd like to find out, I have heard that Texas Public Policy Foundation has filed a lawsuit. I'd like, if that's true, if you could give us whatever update is available. But my concern goes deeper than that. This has to be implemented by October the 1st. And if everybody implements it, or whoever can implement it by October the 1st, it's going to make it that much more difficult for Paul to pull it back when everybody spent the money to change their accounting systems, change their budgets, change their benefit brochures and everything for 2 months, and then all of a sudden it's another different world. Is it possible to file an injunction? Has anybody thought about filing an injunction? It seems to me there's something else that needs to be done here.
Well, thank you for those questions. I'll respond to that because I'm the lead counsel and there has been a suit filed. As y'all could see, the point of today's policy primer event was not to have a hearing, not to have a trial, not to have a debate over the lawsuit. But it's public, and I'm happy to speak to that. Our litigation center here at TPPF, we represent a broad coalition of business interests. We represent NFIB, Texas Association of Business, the American Staffing Association, and several individual businesses that have filed a lawsuit saying that the city ordinance is unconstitutional. And just real quick, without turning this into a discussion about the case, there's 4 claims in the lawsuit. One is that the city ordinance violates current state law, the Texas Minimum Wage Act, which already addresses the maximum minimum wage that can be mandated in Texas. And then there's 3 constitutional claims in that. The first is that there's an equal protection issue because of the exemption that's given to employers that have a collective bargaining agreement, and you have the other employers have to be subject to it. So that's unequal treatment under the law. The second claim is due course of law that says that there just wasn't a legitimate governmental interest for the city of Austin to adopt this regulation based on any real data or evidence or statistics. Tina spoke to that with the request of a study to see, what was going on here in Austin. And then there's the issue raised about one of the aspects of the ordinance, which we didn't mention here today, was that it gives the city the subpoena power to go and subpoena the business records of any business that has a complaint filed against it, whether anonymous, unverified, or whatever. And we allege in this suit that violates the constitutional protections against unlawful search and seizure. So there is a hearing later this month on June 25th. It's open to the public. And that's going to be a hearing that's already publicly noticed where we filed a motion trying to ask the courts to step in and stop the implementation of the ordinance before it goes into effect, so that Representative Workman and the legislature can have a chance to address this during the next legislative session, or at least so that the courts can determine the legality of this ordinance before businesses like Skeeter's and all the rest in this area have to start complying when it goes into effect on October 1st. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Clint?
Thanks. I wanted to just, before I ask my question, I just want to say, as someone who has worked off and on in the service industry for the last 15 years, the idea that I need Greg Kassar and his little socialist stormtroopers to protect me in my relationship with my employer is insulting. My question is for Representative Workman. You mentioned during your remarks the Fair Chance hiring bill, the Austin Energy stuff, the couple of other bills you filed. I would also add to that the tree ordinance bill that we were discussing in this room less than a year ago. Yeah. In each one of those cases, I think you filed very good bills, but they didn't seem to be able to make it out of the House. Why should we have any confidence this time's going to be different?
Well, the tree ordinance, we did make some progress on the tree ordinance. We can't always get all the way at one time. And so the tree ordinance is, we did get something done on that. Fair chance hiring was bottled up by a Democrat in the calendars committee, and I couldn't get it out of there until it was too late. And but we'll be back. There will be a new speaker this time. I think that'll be good for me and good for the House. And so I think we'll be able to move some of these things on further than they went this last time.
Thank you. We have a question here. Yes, sir?
Question for Ms. Spillman. You mentioned outside groups that were influential on the city council in this whole thing coming about. Can you just describe or name them or identify what groups we should be on the lookout for?
Sure. Well, and like I've always said, I think every group needs to be represented by someone or some association, but it's been pretty public that the Workers' Defense Project has been behind this and, used a lot of the same language they've used in other states. We know, even though they claim to be a member organization, that only they've had about $2 million in revenue last year. Their tax records show, and only 8,000 of that came from their actual members. They're well funded by the SEIU, AFL-CIO, AFSCME. So these are national labor organizations. And I don't want to make comment on anything about them. They're doing what they feel like they need to do. But I think that we need to be honest on who's really pushing this legislation. And, they blame whenever business organizations file legislation, they say, well, this is just an ALEC model. This is just some out-of-state model, and usually not the case. But, let's be honest, they're floating this stuff around nationwide. And I think that they need to be a little bit more clear about how they're funded. And hopefully the Supreme Court case at the national level, Janice, will help expose how they are being funded and where these policy suggestions are actually coming from.
Anything to add, folks? All right. Here we go. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My question is directed towards Mr. Miller. Have you brought this ordinance up to the attention of your employees? And if you have, how are they taking this? What are their views on it? And if you haven't, what do you believe their views or other employees' views on this would be?
Well, to answer your question, yes, my management team and meets once a month to go over all kinds of issues that we have, as well as a conference call with our teams at the restaurant. So they're fully aware of it. They haven't. I just have a great group. They feel like that they've got a great place to work, and they're just really not concerned with it. You know, I mean, they've got a great schedule. They get to change their schedule when they want to. I just haven't gotten any feedback from them, and I've been very transparent. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, we ought to congratulate these folks. I've sat here many times and listened to these lectures, and I do come here to learn something more than just to get the free chicken. Two things I would want to, I really admire, that every one of you looked at the problems we're dealing with in the aspect of reality. Anything that's imposed on us by the government is a cost against our business, and you magnified that. And we often forget that. There's no magic stream of water that runs under a business. They just go down and get all the profit they want. That doesn't exist. But there's an illusion, and it started out in our Congress, and we see it permeating all the way down. It's like cancer. Once it starts one place, it keeps continuing. I'm going to give you a little addition, Mr. Workman. You use the term ideology. Ideology is a visionary theory, and communism and state planning is not visionary, and it's far past being a theory. There's another word they have, it's called ideology, and I like that one because an ideology is stupidity advanced with total ignorance. Here's my statement. I wanna congratulate you, Mrs. Tina Grander Cannon. She summed up this whole thing in one sentence. She said, government did something and they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks again for a great discussion. My question was for Representative Workman. Just wondering what you think the proper legislative response is at the state level on this, responding particularly to the paid sick leave ordinance, but also other ordinances, particularly when we're trying to preserve the argument that ordinances like this one are already preempted by the Texas Labor Code. Like, in other words, why would you need to act if it's already preempted?
Well, we need to act because the city council has adopted an ordinance, and the response needs to be that we need to have legislation that says you can't do this. And we'll do that with all of these different ordinances that they're passing.
Well, and I'll add, if you don't mind, because we don't actually have language in code right now, we're having to be reactive instead of proactive, so we're reacting with a lawsuit. I think it's time that the legislature be proactive like they've done in other states. The minimum wage thing's covered in law, but we haven't covered the other aspects of, these local ordinances. And so I think that's why we actually do need to put in code language that strictly prohibits these local ordinances. If you'd add anything.
No, thank you. Another question from the audience, right here.
Thank you. My name is Travis Mitchell. I'm actually the mayor of Kyle, so I just wanted to thank the city of Austin for giving an opportunity for the city of Kyle to attract business down this way. I'm also a 10-year small business owner, and so I kept hearing Representative Workman talk about ideology as well, and I think I have an ideology, and I think that the left side of this policy also has an ideology. But my question really, I'm thinking about minimum wage, which has been brought up. I'm thinking about Social Security, which is very much a small business tax, and an employer tax, an employee tax. but the left, they talk about how markets sort of trend out. And when you set a new baseline, the markets react and adopt, and it can help the safety net. So I'm trying to kind of look at it from some of the anecdotes that have been presented by the city council of Austin when they talk about the single mom who's working. She's really struggling. She's got to get her kid to the doctor, but she can't afford to take time off work. So can you respond a little bit to the idea that maybe this isn't the worst thing? Because I think in their mind it's certainly a moral good to protect those who are vulnerable. And why in particular do you believe that this would be so devastating as opposed to just establishing a new baseline?
Well, so I guess my question, I would answer the question with a question. And the question is, where would you stop? If it's not the single mom and her child, then is it something else that sounds even more? And, you know, the free market is the ideal way to take care of these issues. And it's just not government's role to be involved in telling employers how to hire people and how to treat people. That is up to the market for them to do. So there always is a so-called moral made for these things, but the fact of the matter is we're on higher moral ground when we let the free market take care of it.
Skeeter, something that I would be concerned of for you is at my store we give 2 weeks PTO, but I'm more worried about what might happen in the next thing that the city council does. But let's say you have a person says they start calling in sick and they're not sick, they're using it as time off, just days off. What happens after 4 days? Because I had an employee once say, I'm going to be sick a week from Tuesday. What do you mean you're going to be sick a week from Tuesday? That's a vacation day, so I can plan my schedule like you do. So let's say after they call in sick 4 days in a month and you fire them. Are they now going to go to the city council and say, hey, I got fired because they don't want to pay my sick time that you told them they had to pay for me, and now you're going to get sued for that? That's what I'd be more concerned about.
Well, I'm going to call Tommy Simmons and I'm going to ask Tommy with the Texas Workforce Commission what I should do, because that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's assuming they don't stop by the press office on the way.
Yeah. And I'll just say while you're walking over there, at the legislative level too, we see a lot of legislation filed from folks that have good intention, whether it be the morality of something or whatever, equal pay. But they're opening up the code for an unlawful employment practice, and that just means sue an employer. And so the more things you add to what an unlawful employment practice is, it's the more opportunity for an employer to be sued. And I'll tell you that from the small business aspect, oftentimes, and we drilled down on this last session, they don't have the time or the money to hire a lawyer or time to go to court, so they often just settle. So it's almost like a bribe. They sue these employers, and they know they're just going to sell out. They're really just bribing them. And this happens all the time, all the time.
We had another question? Yes, sir.
Yes, I just want to thank you all for being here, Skeeter. But one of our concerns would be as restaurateurs that we employ a lot of people. So we don't distinguish in this ordinance between full-time and part-time workers. So I could have a high school girl that works 15 hours a week, and after 2 weeks she's worked 30 hours, she's earned 1 hour of paid sick leave. So when you do the math on this, because at the end of the day, business is simply a math problem, and it's not complicated math. And so when we look at what happens to the balance sheet at the end of the year, that we have to accrue 64 hours of unpaid sick leave. And all those things are really just misunderstood by the public. I think many of the employers that I know that we talk about this, we agree that mom needs a day off and somebody's sick, and I mean that's one thing, but it morphed from paid sick leave to paid time off. And so my real comment and question would be, there's never a distinction between what a large employer is and a small employer. The typical way we measure large employer is the number of employees. So Skeeter and I may have 50, 60 employers, so we're considered from the ACA and all that as large employers. But we have a predominant number of part-time employees. So when these costs hit a a business that's labor intensive, a lot of employees, it has a tremendous impact. And I don't know how we account for that.
Well, that's a fair point, and just to point out with this ordinance is that in the ordinance, the dividing line is 15 employees. An employer of 0 to 15 employees is required to provide up to 48 hours a year of paid leave. Over 15 employees goes up to 60. But to your point, for someone under the ordinance, once you've worked 80 hours in a year, you vest. And then even if that employee leaves, you have to keep that time on the books because it doesn't expire. It doesn't expire at the end of the year. It doesn't expire if the person leaves for another job. And I guess presumably, we don't know how it's going to work, if that person was to ever come back.
It's a one-year provision.
They would be able to still demand that time that was accrued. Tina, how's that going to work?
That's what we keep asking. How is this functionally going to work? How is it going to work for a temp agency? How is it going to work for an airline that has a flight crew that's based in Arizona that has one sick leave ordinance? They fly in and out on their normal route and book time here in Austin. Right? How is it going to work for the guy who's got a plumbing shop that he's based in Kyle because he can't afford land to put his trucks on, but yet he services the Austin area? How is it going to work? Those are questions that we try to pose in the ramp up to this ordinance. I'll steal a quote from the Statesman who came out against this process. Alberta Phillips, the Statesman, said, "Even a righteous goal can be unfair when the means to that end are flawed." Right, and that's kind of where we are. Right, it's a great quote. Right? It makes you tear jerk because we don't know the answers to these operational questions. Now, folks on the other side will say, "Well, it's been done in other communities." Has it? Has it been done well? What do we know about that? What are the studies showing? Right, and how can we apply that here? We spent more time in Austin studying the impact on a salamander than we did on the impact on the small business employer in town.
I'm going to leave that as perfect. And I want to thank you. I want to thank Representative Paul Workman, Ms. Annie Spillman, Mr. Skeeter Miller, Ms. Tina Cannon for being our panelists and discussing today, the costs and consequences of mandating paid sick leave. And so will you all help me to thank them as well?
Thank you all. Thank you all.